Good to see you guys. It's awesome just to be together in this place, and obviously hearing the kids sing is just one of the greatest joys in the world. And thank you, Scott and Kim, for your testimony and lighting our joy candle. I hope you'll join us next Sunday as our elementary choir, or if you want to call it a choir, is going to be singing in our service, and that'll be a lot of fun too, and so I hope to see you here for that. Before we dive into our time together in God's Word, I do have one special announcement that I'll keep pretty brief for you. But if you've been with us over the last year or so as a church, you've probably felt what we've all been feeling, and it's just been exciting to see God kind of growing our church. And so as leaders of our church, we've been really prayerfully asking and talking since probably August in a serious sense about how do we steward the growth that God has been bringing. And so we've been exploring that for quite some time. And so at the community forum in November with our members, and we all gathered together, we talked about the potential of adding a second service on Sunday mornings to create more space for people to come and be able to sit with their loved ones and their friends and their family. And so this last week, our pastors on staff met, and we officially have decided that on February 2nd, so the first Sunday of February, we're going to be adding a second service here on Sundays. That will make January a really big month for us because at the very end of January, that last Sunday of January, we're going to be celebrating our 75th anniversary as a church, and which is amazing. Yeah. And when we celebrate that anniversary, we're going to have a special service time that day. We are going to meet that Sunday, not at 9:15, but 9:30, just to make you confused. And no, there's some reasons for it. But we'll be meeting at 9:30 that day to celebrate. We're going to have a big dinner afterwards out on the lawn. It'll be a great time of celebration, some special things that'll happen that day. But after that Sunday then, the next Sunday, we are going to move into a transitional time where we begin to have that second service for people to come. And the reason, again, that we're doing this is to create space so that we can reach more people to impact more places in this world. And that's really our heart and our intention behind all of that. And so I know that change is hard. I know that often change doesn't even feel ideal for everybody. And so, but it's my hope as your pastor that in the midst of change, that you don't feel like a victim of change, but you feel a part of that change. And so here's what I would like you to do. I would love for you to just be praying about this change, to be opening your hands before God and to pray for this change, that through the midst of it all, that we would be able to see people having even greater freedom to invite their family, to invite their non-believing friends to come and worship with us on Sundays and hear the gospel message. So be praying for that. But I would also love for you to be praying with open hands for ways that God might be leading you to get involved. There are so many needs that we always have as a church to make Sundays not only just happen, but to make Sundays be an event where we come together and we really build each other up. To have people come on this campus not just to consume something, but to contribute something. And so if you're not serving in any capacity, I would love for you just to be praying about how God might be leading you to do that. We're going to need more greeters, more ushers, some people to help in the parking lot, kids ministry, and all these kinds of things. And so I would just love for you to be praying about that, be asking God, how might you be leading me to get involved and to participate and contribute to building others up on Sunday in our faith. And so if you have any questions about anything, you're going to be hearing a lot more communication about this in the weeks ahead. But I wanted you to know about that today. I know February feels like so far away, but I wanted you to know about it today. And you can ask me any questions you have or any other staff or leaders in our church, and they would love to have those conversations with you. But we're excited about this transition, and we hope that you'll be joining us in prayer for it as well. All right, with all that said, I want to invite you to open your Bibles with me to the book of John, chapter 1. We're looking at John's prologue during this season of Advent about how God has loved the world, and so he sent his son, Jesus, the eternal pre-existent one, into this world to rescue us, to save us. And so we've been looking at his rich prologue, the first 18 verses, as we've tried to once again just turn our attention to the wonder of the incarnation of Jesus that we celebrate this time every year. And today we're looking at verses 9 through 13. This is what it says. It says, "The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God." Heavenly Father, we come to you this time together, and we want to open your word, and we want you to speak to us. Lord, would you so graciously do that? Would you open our eyes? Would you make our ears in tune with you? Lord, would you soften our hearts that we would be humble and receptive to what it is that you want to say to us today, that we would embrace you in faith and respond to your word in the ways that you're calling us to live it out. Would you do that now in this time? In Jesus' name, amen. If you think about it, there are many things in life that are very polarizing. Things that I would argue that you either love them or you hate them. There's a lot of foods, for example, that are like this. I mean, I rarely meet someone who, when you bring up the conversation topic of blue cheese, that they're like, "No, I'm fine, I can take it away." Most people are like, "I love blue cheese," or "I hate blue cheese," right? Mushrooms are disgusting, right? I mean, most people are like this, right? I mean, mushrooms, cilantro, all these kind of food items, right? People either love them or hate them, okay? If you're generally at all interested in baseball, the Dodgers, right? You either love the Dodgers or most of the world hates the Dodgers, right? I mean, there's like teams like that, that are very polarizing sorts of teams. My favorite example, I think, is the scalp massager. Do you guys know what the scalp massager is? Those things with those long tentacles that come down over your scalp. I have never met a person who's like neutral on the scalp massager, right? How many people love the scalp massager, right? And how many people are wrong? Right? I mean, the scalp massager is amazing, isn't it? It's incredible, right? But most people, they either love it or they hate it, And I would say this is probably more of a select few things, right? Most things in the world, we kind of feel neutral on them, I mean, Starbucks, I mean, it's not the 90s anymore. And so everyone's like, yeah, it's fine. People like Starbucks. It's not their favorite anymore. Or like the San Diego Chargers, right? The Los Angeles Chargers, a team like the Chargers, people are like, yeah, they're fine. I mean, no one loves them or hates them. I think most music is this way, right? Most music, unless it's like an extreme genre like scream rock or punk or something, most people are like, yeah, it's fine. It's good. I think people are this way. The vast majority of people in this world that you meet, and it's not a slight in any way, but the vast majority of people you meet in this world that are just good, nice people, you're like, yeah, that person's great. I like that person. But you don't feel like you have to be their friend, I'd say most people were kind of like neutral on them. Yeah, they're nice. Right? So many things in the world are this way. And my point is there are things that are polarizing and things that are neutral in this world. And I think what's really interesting is that for most of us living in the Western world, we put Jesus into that second category. He's like a neutral person to us. He's fine. I like some of the things he says. I don't like some of the other things that he says. Right? There's things that he did that are pretty believable, things that I don't know about that. Right? There's things about Jesus that make us like him but not hate him in our minds. So most people tend to have this sort of attitude towards Jesus. I don't love him, but I don't hate him. I'm not rejecting him, but I'm not really fully embracing him. But in our passage this morning, we're getting prodded towards this end that says we can't do that with Jesus. That if you were to really encounter Jesus, you would never respond to him with neutrality. You would never respond to him with neutrality. And so our passage is pushing us with this thought, what are you going to do with Jesus? If God so loved the world that he gave us Jesus, what are you going to do with him? What are you going to do with him? You can't stay neutral if you were to truly encounter him this Christmas. So there's two types of people in this world, and only two. Our passage reveals them. It's those that reject Jesus and those that receive Jesus. There is not a group in our passage or in the entire New Testament who didn't reject Jesus and didn't receive Jesus. That category does not exist. So we're going to look at these two types of receptions that Jesus had in this world once he came. And here's what I want you to see. The first thing is this, is that Jesus experienced rejection. He experienced rejection. And then we're going to look at the second part in just a moment and see why that matters for you. Why that matters for you. And then we're going to circle back to that first question. What are you going to do with him today? So first, he experienced rejection. Right, that's sort of like the climax point of these first three verses 9 through 11. Right, but there's a very important progression of thought that we need to follow in order to get the magnitude of what that actually means, what happens here. Verse 9, what does it say again? The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. We're back to this image of light that we saw in verses 4 all the way through verse 8. Look at verse 4 again. It says, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And then if you're with us last week, looked at John the Baptist and how he bears witness to who the light is. In verse 8 it says, he was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. And so the next line says, the true light, who gives light to everyone, is coming into the world. The one that John's bearing witness about, Jesus Christ himself, he was coming into the world. He is the true light. That means he's the real deal. He's not a knockoff. He's not a poser. He's not an imposter. Jesus is the true light. What does that even mean? Well, if you go back again to verses 4 and 5, it means that he is the source of life. He is the source of truth. He is light. He is God himself. That's what he means, that he's the real deal. This is not God sending just another messenger into the world. This is not another broken human like you and me who have all fallen under the curse of Adam in this world. No, this is God himself. He is the source of light. He is the true light, and he is coming into the world. This is God in the flesh. Guys, this is incredible stuff when you slow down and think about it. And I know this time of the year, our minds are skipping from one thing to the next, but this is the greatest thing that you could slow down and contemplate. Don't lose the wonder of this. Here, in our violent world, in our confused world, in this real world of betrayal and foolishness, into this world, the same world that you actually live in, God himself, the true light, came, was coming. God came down. God came down. It happened 2,000 years ago, and Jesus, the real life concreteness of God's visit in this world. Do not think of Jesus as an ethical idea. He's not just a set of thoughts, of ways to live your life. His existence is not dependent upon our belief in him being real. He really did come. He came into real history, concrete history, as a fact that is external to us. And John is describing this event in the most beautiful, poetic way in all of human history. The eternal God enters time. The invisible God, you could touch him. You could touch him. Do you realize how unique this is? It's the most unique thing in the face of this planet, and that's why people struggle to believe it. It's hard to believe. Jesus is God drawing near. He is fully God, and yet he is fully man. There's nothing else on earth like this. I love how R.G. Lee said it. He said, Jesus was the only man who had a heavenly father, but no heavenly mother, who had an earthly mother, but no earthly father, who was older than his mother, and who was as old as his father. Right? It's just one of the, it's just like someone trying to figure this out, right? How do you explain something like this? Right? I mean, how wonderful is this person? Guys, every single belief system in this world is constantly telling you to go and find God, to go and try to figure it out, to stumble your way there. It puts the weight and the burden on you to do that. You do the searching, you do the climbing, you do the performing, and every belief system tries to point you to God, right? Trying to give you the right steps or the certain tips or certain clues to find God. But here, in Christianity, and what we're remembering about who God truly is this morning, we are told the exact opposite, that God has come to find you. He's come to find you. And so we see in verse 9, the true light, God himself, is coming into the world. And look at what he does. He gives light to everyone. To everyone. Well, what does that mean? It means his truth, his light, invades every human heart. It shines on every person, and guess what happens when that happens? It divides every person into two groups: those who hate the light and those who love the light. These first few verses here, in verses 10 through 11, are devoted to understanding the people who hate the light, who reject the light. Verse 10, what does it say? He was coming into the world, and then we see him here in verse 10. He's now in the world, and the world was made through him. And then what does it say? Yet the world did not know him. It didn't know him. The Creator was in the midst of the people he created, and they didn't even recognize him. I mean, just meditate on that. God himself shows up in the flesh, looking at the very people he's made, and they don't even recognize him. I mean, this is way more jaw-dropping than like an episode of Undercover Boss. If you remember that old show? We're like, whoa, this is crazy. You know, I mean, no, this is crazy. I saw this the other day as well. I don't know if this was over on Santa Monica or somewhere, but there was a video that came out of a street performer who's like a drummer drumming on an entire drum kit, and he's blaring Red Hot Chili Peppers music. And he's drumming to Red Hot Chili Peppers music, and he's nailing it. Well, if you didn't know, Chad Smith is the drummer for Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he's like one of the most renowned drummers in this world. And he's drumming, he's nailing it. He's giving homage to how great Chad Smith is. He's drumming. There's nobody around, at least in the photo and the video, except for one person, and that one person is Chad Smith. That guy sitting there is the drummer to the Red Hot Chili Peppers, just sitting there watching this guy drum, and this guy has no idea who's watching him. It's the very guy that he's trying to do his stuff, right? Chad Smith's inventing these songs, he's creating these songs, and here's a guy trying to do it homage in some way, and he has no idea who that person is that's watching him. He's just so glad that somebody's watching him. I love this because if you've seen the video or if you've look at a picture like this, we go, man, that's crazy. But you think that's crazy. Imagine being the creator of every person and then showing up in the flesh and those people not even recognizing God. That's crazy. That's crazy. The true light has come, right? We're in the presence of God is what John is saying in the person of Jesus. He's now coming. He's now in the world. His light is shining on everyone, but they don't even recognize him, but it gets worse. Verse 11. He came not only into this world, but to say he came to his own. John takes it one step further. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. You could apply his own people to be every human being. You could do that because God created every person. And so sure, in some ways, every person is God's person because he made them. But John is talking about something very specific. He's talking about the Jewish people. He's talking about God's chosen people, Israel, and how they were the ones that were waiting for God to send the Messiah. They were the ones that were in the land of darkness, waiting for the light to come. And here they are being told the light actually came, and they didn't receive him. That means they rejected him. And their rejection, again, was not neutral. It wasn't like, we'll wait for somebody else. Their rejection was not emotional. It wasn't relational. It was actually to the extent of being physical. They crucified him. Their rejection drove them to kill the Messiah, to crucify him. It was not neutral. It was not neutral. They hated Jesus. Not everyone loves the light. Not everyone loves the light. I mean, every morning when I go around waking up my kids for school, I walk in and I turn on the lights and I open up the blinds and let that California sunshine in, and every one of my kids throws the blanket over their head, right? They hate the light. They hate the light. They love the darkness every morning when it's a school day. Every morning. But on Christmas morning, I don't have to wake them up. They love the light. They love the light, right? You get this. That's the picture that the Bible paints of the world before Jesus came. Shrouded, just covered in darkness. And the light has come, the true light has come into the world, and for some that produces joy, and for others that produces fear, hiding, hatred. We know why. Because darkness hides our flaws, doesn't it? It hides our flaws. This is why if I want to go on a romantic date with my wife and we go to some restaurant that's a romantic restaurant, the lighting is always dim, isn't it? Why? It's so that the husbands can look more attractive, you know? That's exactly why. So your wife sits there and they're like, you know what? I haven't seen him in this light in a while, right? I mean, we get this. The sharper the light, the brighter the light, the sharper the detail. The brighter the light is, the more you can notice all the detail, right? That's how light works. When it's brighter, it exposes everything, doesn't it? Right? This is how we get this. We so get this. I mean, this is why we even have language just built into our language here in our culture. Like if someone does something bad, we might say they're a shady person, right? We're talking about the darkness within them. Right? We have so many crimes are committed at night versus broad daylight, or at least behind closed doors. Right? Most people don't just go out into the public square and commit their crimes. They're trying to keep things hidden. We understand this. The brighter the light, the sharper the details. And so here's the thing. Jesus, the true light, has come, and in his vivid brightness, in all of his beauty, in the perfection of God himself, he has come into this world, and his light exposes our ugliness. It exposes our lack of perfection. And so in turn, we have this shame, right? We have this guilt, don't we? And so we want to hide. And John describes this perfectly in chapter 3. Just 2 chapters from now, he says this: the light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. They hate the light and do not come to the light lest their works should be exposed. Lest their works should be exposed. The light exposes us, and so we hide. And so we hide. We throw the blanket over our head. We say, turn off the lights. And that's exactly what has happened. Jesus, God in the flesh, has come near, and he experienced rejection. He experienced rejection. He knows what rejection feels like. I mean, I hate being rejected, don't you? I hate being rejected. I mean, I have a memory of being a 5th grade boy and having a crush on my older sister's friend. She was in 8th grade. And I told my sister, hey, I want you to tell Spring, was her name, I like her. Report back to me what she says. And she came back hours later, and I go, so what did she say? And she goes, well, she laughed and said, that's cute. And I remember thinking, that's cute? Are you serious? You know, I thought I was like a man, you know? I was not a man. And that was like a, whatever, sweet, let me down nicely. Who cares? I'm a 5th grader, right? But still, rejection is painful, isn't it? I mean, I think that's why parenting can be hard at some level, honestly. When your kids are little, when all these preschools are up here, right? They adore you as parents. You're like their hero, right? They love you. You walk through the door, they come running, they embrace you, right? But then when they become teenagers, right, you go from being the coolest person in the world to the most uncool person in the world, right? And as a parent, you're like, man, this is hard. This transition's pretty hard. Why? You're experiencing some forms of rejection. These are real, lighthearted experiences of rejection. But I know there are people in your life who maybe you've really opened up to, and after you did, they distanced themselves from you. Maybe you were once close, and now they've rejected you, right? They won't return your calls. They won't show up for you in some way. You could argue that there is nothing worse than being known by someone and being rejected by them. As if you're walking through a difficult situation where you've experienced rejection, the Christmas story is once again a reminder that God himself experienced rejection. He's the creator and he was rejected. They didn't know him. They didn't receive him. They said, I'm out. Right? This is your God. Like he knows exactly what this is like. Even more so. But here's the good news. Why was he rejected even to the point of death? Well, it's so that if you could see it, if you could not recoil in the corner, right, in the darkness, it's so that you could experience God's fatherly reception. He experienced rejection so that you could experience God's fatherly reception. This is what we see in verses 12 through 13. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. To all who did receive him, what does it look like to receive him? Is to believe in his name. And his name is not just a label. His name is a word that is meant for us to understand the character of the person himself. If you've believed Jesus is the one I've been waiting for, if you've done this, what does it say? That God has given you the right to become children of God. Meaning this is not our right to be God's child. Becoming a child of God is a privilege. It's a privilege. Look at this birth language that we see here in verse 13. To all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God who were born. Born. If you believe in Jesus, you don't just have some new thoughts and ideas that you walk around with in this world. The Bible is teaching you that you are actually made brand new. You become a whole new kind of person. You go through the birth canal again, as it were, and you're scooped up into the arms of God, and he smiles upon you with his fatherly care. And that, it's not your right. That is an act of sheer grace of God. It's an act of sheer grace. I mean, the idea here in verse 12 is that you cannot choose which family you were born into. Have you ever thought about that? I probably think about that way too much. Not because I don't love my family, I love my family, but I have that thought all the time, like, that would be weird if I was born in Boston. I've never been to Boston, or Norway, or Africa, and that's all I knew, right? Do you guys ever have weird thoughts like this? I think about this stuff all the time, right? Like, you didn't choose when you were born, who you were born to. Same is true in a spiritual birth, conversion, salvation experience. Right? You don't just get to show up at someone's house now that you are born in this world and go, hey, I've decided I'm going to be in your family now. Right? You don't get to do that. Right? We just call the police. Someone does that, You don't get to do that. That's not your right. That's not your right. See, it's interesting that John could edit things down for us a lot here in verse 13. He could simply write, if you look at the verse, who were born of God. He could say that. He gave the right to become children of God who were born of God. He could simply say that, but he doesn't do that. He wants you to understand who did this. Who did this? He wants us to understand that our being born as children of God, by receiving and responding in faith to Jesus, by actually receiving him and not rejecting him, It's not something that is given to us based upon what our heritage is. It's not something that we've done based upon what our parents wanted us to do. It's not something that happens through our own will because we just came up with the idea to do it, right? It's not something that happens through someone else's will. It only happens through the will of God. God did it, is what John is saying. New birth is nothing other than the act of God. It's God who shines his light on you, and if you find it in your heart, even though there's fear there, because again, light exposes the darkness in you. Even though there's fear there, if you have this sense of like, this is scary, but I'm going to come into the light. I'm going to step into this light, and I'm going to have my guilt dealt with. I'm going to have my shame dealt with at the foot of the cross of Jesus. This is a sign of God acting in grace in your life. I mean, do you know what this means? That it doesn't matter, you guys. It does not matter what your heritage is. It doesn't matter how great your family is or how not great your family is in this world. It doesn't matter who your mom or your dad is. It doesn't matter what they've done. And it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how much wealth you have or don't have. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. It doesn't matter what culture you came from. It doesn't matter how strong you feel or how moral you feel like you are. Flesh and blood can't do this. All flesh and blood would want to hide in the dark. Only God can do this. And John really wants you to know this. To all who would simply receive him and believe in his name, you have been born again into the fatherly arms of Jesus, of God himself. And you have been now given the right to become children of God. John wants you to know that is a miracle. That is a miracle of God. It's like imagining yourself waking up on a stretcher in the back of an ambulance. And you have the panic come over you all of a sudden. You're like, where am I? What happened? And the EMT just kind of puts their hand on your shoulder. And they say, hey, it's all right. You were in a really serious accident. You've lost a lot of blood, but thankfully we got to you in time. We stabilized you, right? We're taking you to the hospital. You're going to make a full recovery. Just you're going to be okay. Like in a moment like that, the EMT is not asking you to do anything. They're just asking you to trust them, to keep their promise. That's exactly the image that John is giving us here of what Jesus did for us. Our sin wrecked our relationship with God, and it spiraled us into the darkness, and Jesus has come as the true light to rescue us. And if you can see that, if you can believe that, if you don't want to stand neutral on that, it's like waking up on a stretcher, looking at Jesus, saying, hey, I've got this. I've done this. All you have to do is believe on me. You just got to believe on me. Just receive me. Believe that I'm going to do what I said I would do. Believe that I did what you've heard that I did. Just like in the original creation, the formless creation didn't sit there void, right? And decide to give birth to new life. Just like the original creation didn't have a will when God spoke into being, he spoke, God himself, into the deadness and nothingness, and life sprang forth. In the same way, we don't have spiritual life, but when God speaks to us, if our response is reception, his voice creates new life in our hearts, and we are reborn. And it's not of blood, nor the will of flesh. It's of God. So what are you going to do with Jesus if you can't stay neutral on him? If you were to truly encounter Jesus this Christmas, I don't care who you are, you would not be neutral. You would not be neutral. You're either going to throw the blanket over your head, or you're going to pop out of bed like Christmas morning, right? If you're here this morning and you're not a Christian, I'm so glad that you're here. But if you sense a desire in you growing, like a warming of your own heart to be reconciled to God, to be saved by Jesus. And if you look at Jesus this morning and you think, man, I believe this. I believe Jesus is my Savior. I believe he really is the Son of God. Those desires did not come from you. Right? They came from God, and all I can tell you is this: if you're sensing him moving in your heart this morning, don't resist him. Don't harden your heart towards him. Right? He's inviting you into the light to experience his healing grace. All you have to do is step out into the light. All you have to do is believe. All you have to do is receive him. That's what our passage is telling you. Don't harden your heart. Right? It's those who love the light who step into the spaces where they are exposed, because they know when they finally step into the light, they are not going to be shamed by God, but they're going to be forgiven by God. They're going to be forgiven by God. And if you do receive him, or if you have received him, you know now God's fatherly care. You know his fatherly care. J.I. Packer once famously said, "What is a Christian?" That question can be answered, he said, in many ways, but the richest answer I know is that a Christian is one who has God as his father. Who has God as his father. Your most profound identity is knowing you are God's child, and that was God's doing. You have no idea the kind of security this gives you in believing that. That I am a child of God. I am his son. I am his daughter, right? And he's the one who made that happen. I didn't walk up to his door and say, "I want to be in your family." And he goes, "All right, I guess we got a spare room." No. He willed that. He did that. I mean, this is going to make a profound difference in your life, you guys. I think about this question a lot recently, because we live in an affluent place, okay? Redlands, I love Redlands. Beautiful place. I love our community so much. Even if you live in Highland, Yucaipa, affluent places in this world. And so I think we need to wrestle with this question. Like, what is the difference? If you're a Christian, what is the difference between you and a good, moral, middle-class person living in this part of the country? Like, what is really the difference between us? Because sometimes our vision of Christianity can be that we're just trying to be good people, contribute things in the world or something, not be a suck on society or whatever it is, right? There's a lot of things we could list there. But what really is the difference between us? Or do you find it hard, as sometimes I do, when I'm interacting with another person in this community that's not a Christian, and they even have similar values that I do sometimes, and I'm like, well, what is really the difference between us? You ever wrestle with that? What's the difference? There's a lot of answers we could probably give, but at the core, it's this. You know who you are. You know whose care you're in. You know who you belong to. You know that he's not going to reject you. You know what it's like to step into the light and have all that shame and guilt rid in your life. You know what that's like. And that'll change everything for you. You guys, this time of the year, if you're reading a passage like this, is an incredible opportunity to not only wonder that God came near, but to wonder that he willed you into his family. To wonder that he said, "I want you." To wonder at that. To wonder that if he had not come, if he had not spoken into your life, that you would still be lost in the darkness. You would still be dead in your sin. But wonder that you are a child of God. And that is not of your own doing. And your parents didn't do that. And no one else coached you into it. God did it. To all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right. He gave the right to become children of God.